Pay attention to what your body is doing right now, not what your mind is saying about it, not the story you are already composing about why today feels the way it does, but the raw physical fact of how you are sitting with this moment. Because something has changed in the atmosphere between yesterday and today, and the part of you that processes the world before language gets to it has already registered the difference. There is a quality to March 29th, 2026 that is difficult to describe using the ordinary vocabulary of daily life, but it is not difficult to feel. It has the texture of a held breath finally releasing. It has the quality of a person standing at the edge of a cliff, not afraid of falling, but genuinely unsure whether they are about to jump or turn back, and understanding, perhaps for the first time, that both options are available and both options are real. Venus has arrived at 29 degrees of Aries today. And if you have spent any time at all studying astrology, or even if you have simply absorbed through the years of watching the sky that certain positions carry more weight than others, you already know what 29 degrees means. The final degree of any sign, the degree astrologers call the Anaretic degree. The degree where a planet is no longer building towards something within a sign, but is completing it, finishing the last of its unfinished business, standing at the threshold between one entire chapter of experience and the next. Venus at 2009 degrees of Aries is not in transition. Transition implies something gradual, something that unfolds over time. This is an edge, a precise, non-negotiable now or never edge. And tomorrow, when Venus crosses into Taurus, the sign of her own deepest power and comfort, something about today will simply be over. But the sky does not let you stand at that edge in silence. It sends the moon into Virgo today to witness it. The moon entering Virgo is the analytical, clear-eyed, detail-oriented witness to the full magnitude of what Venus is doing. Virgo sees, not through the rose-tinted lens of longing, not through the distorting pressure of emotion, but through the precise, careful, unflinching attention that Virgo has always brought to the things it loves enough to truly examine. The moon in Virgo today does not soften what Venus is facing, it illuminates it. And what it illuminates, for all 12 signs of the zodiac, is the honest truth about what has been left unresolved, what is almost ready to change, and what the body and the heart have been quietly preparing for even when the mind was not yet willing to acknowledge it. That combination, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries and the moon entering Virgo, is the central story of today. But it does not stand alone. Around it the sky has arranged a set of supporting conditions that amplify every theme these two bodies are carrying. And before we go into what this day means for each of the 12 signs, it is worth understanding the full context. Because today is not a single note, it is a chord. And to understand what it is playing, you need to hear all the notes together. Before we go any further into today's sky, there is something I want to place in your hands. If you are watching this on a day when the idea of standing at a threshold resonates, when the idea of completing something and stepping into what comes next feels personally true rather than abstractly interesting, then what I am about to describe is for you. Your birth chart is a map of your soul's intention in this lifetime. Every planet, every placement, every angle was set at the exact moment you took your first breath, in the exact location where that breath happened, and the configuration that was frozen in that instant has been shaping the story of your life ever since. Not in a way that removes your free will, in a way that reveals the terrain through which your free will is meant to move. A deeply personal reading built from your exact birth details reveals your sun, moon, and rising decoded down to their truest meaning. It offers a focused exploration of whichever area of life is most alive for you right now, whether that is love and relationships, career and wealth, or your spiritual path. It uncovers the hidden karmic patterns and subconscious cycles that have been running beneath the surface of your choices without your full awareness. It delivers a month-by-month forecast for 2026 mapped directly to your own natal chart, so that the transits we discuss here become not abstract collective events, but personal inflection points that you can navigate with clarity. And it closes with a personal transmission about where you are in your own story right now and what your soul is preparing to step into. Delivered as an audio reading and a detailed written report straight to your inbox within 48 hours. The link is below. Now, back to the sky. 29 degrees is one of those positions in astrology that carries weight simply by existing. It is the last degree before a sign changes completely, and every planet that reaches it is engaged in a very specific kind of work. It is not the work of beginnings, which belongs to 0 degrees. It is not the work of the middle, which is the full inhabiting of a sign's energy. It is the work of endings, and endings are their own specialized discipline. Venus at 29 degrees of Aries has been in the fire of this sign since early March. During that time, she moved through some of the most significant astrological weather of this entire year, passing over Neptune and Saturn in their early degrees, forming aspects that asked every one of us to look honestly at what we desire, why we desire it, and whether the way we have been going after what we want is actually in alignment with who we are becoming. Venus in Aries does not do things gently. It is desire in its most direct and unmediated form. It is the love that reaches out first without waiting to be sure of the response. It is the wanting that does not apologize for itself. It is the part of you that sees something worth moving toward and moves without consulting a committee of inner voices about whether you are allowed. That quality of direct desire has been coursing through the collective field since Venus entered Aries. And now, at 29 degrees, she is not simply moving through fire anymore. She is finishing inside it. And the question the Anaretic degree always asks is the same, regardless of which planet is passing through it. What did you learn here, and what are you taking with you when you leave? For Venus, the answer is about desire and worth. What did you learn about what you actually want, as opposed to what you thought you wanted or what you were supposed to want? What did you learn about the way you pursue the things that matter to you? The directness or the hesitation, the courage or the fear? What did you learn about the relationship between your desires and your sense of deserving, between wanting something and believing you are the kind of person who gets to have it? These are not small questions. They are the questions that shape the entire architecture of a life. And Venus at 29 degrees of Aries is sitting with them today in the most concentrated, urgent, final version they will ever take in this sign. By tomorrow, when she crosses into Taurus and begins her exalted, unhurried, deeply sensory period in the sign of her own comfort, these questions will still matter, but they will be answered from a different place. A softer place, a more embodied place, a place that knows its own worth without having to fight for it. Today, they are still being answered through fire, through urgency, through the particular kind of clarity that only arrives when you are standing at the very last moment of something. What is it that you have been reaching for this month without saying it plainly? What is it that you have been wanting without giving yourself full permission to want it? Venus at 29 degrees of Aries is looking you directly in the face today and asking you to name it. Not because naming it guarantees you get it, but because the failure to name it, the habit of keeping your desires vague and safely unspoken, is the exact thing that has been standing between you and the life you are actually here to build. The moon entered Virgo today, and for anyone who has spent time living with Virgo energy, whether through their own chart or simply through close proximity to people who carry this sign strongly, the shift is immediately noticeable. It is like the difference between walking into a room where someone has scattered everything across every surface and walking into a room where someone has sorted it all carefully and placed it exactly where it needs to be. Not cold, not clinical, precise. The kind of precision that is actually a form of love, because it says, I care enough about this to pay attention to every detail of it. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, the planet of the mind and of discernment, and the moon in this sign is not a dreamy or escapist moon. It does not float above the reality of what it is looking at. It comes down into the specific, the particular, the concrete, and it asks the questions that only someone paying very close attention would think to ask. Not the big dramatic questions of transformation or identity or rebirth, the smaller, sharper questions, the ones that cut through abstraction and land on something real. Does this actually work? Is this actually serving you? What specifically needs to change? What exactly have you been ignoring? The moon in Virgo arriving on the same day Venus is at her final degree in Aries is not an accidental pairing. It is the precise kind of astrological timing that makes you understand, once you have seen enough of it, that the sky is genuinely composed, that the placements are not random, that something vast and intelligent is arranging itself day by day to address the things human beings most need to look at in the most useful possible sequence. Because here is what Venus at 29 degrees of Aries needs today. It needs a witness that will not flinch. Venus in Aries, left to its own devices at this final degree, can fall into one of two traps. The first is drama, the tendency to turn the ending into a crisis, to make the crossing of a threshold so emotionally charged that the actual experience of what is being completed gets lost in the performance of its completion. The second trap is avoidance, the tendency, especially at the last degree, to not quite finish, to get very close to the edge and then pull back just enough to avoid the absolute clarity of the final crossing. The moon in Virgo watches both of these tendencies and gently, methodically, refuses to participate in either of them. Virgo does not do unnecessary drama, and Virgo most certainly does not avoid what needs to be seen and addressed. It brings you back, again and again, to what is actually true, as opposed to what is emotionally convenient, to what is actually needed as opposed to what is familiar, to what is actually ready to be completed, as opposed to what you have been postponing. This is the gift of the moon in Virgo today. It is not making things easier, but it is making them clearer. And clarity, on a day when Venus is standing at the edge of an entire chapter of desire and identity, is the single most useful thing the sky could possibly provide. The moon in Virgo also brings the body back into the conversation. Virgo is, among other things, the sign of physical health, of the relationship between the body and the daily choices that either sustain it or deplete it. When the moon transits here, there is a heightened awareness of what the body is carrying, of where tension lives, of what is creating fatigue or resistance in the physical experience of being alive. Pay attention to that today. The body is not separate from the astrological work of Venus at 29 degrees. It is the instrument through which that work is registered. The chest tightening around an unspoken want. The jaw clenching around a truth that has not yet been said. The shoulders carrying decisions that have not yet been made. The moon in Virgo is asking you to read all of that physical information as carefully as you would read a map, because it is one. There is also something worth noting about the moon trine Venus that forms today. Even as Venus reaches her final urgent degree in Aries, the moon in Virgo forms a trine to her. A trine is the most harmonious angle in astrology, a 120-degree arc of ease and natural cooperation. What this means in practice is that even in the intensity of the last degree, even in the urgency of the threshold, there is a quality of grace in how today's energy lands. The harshness is measured. The clarity is accompanied by a kind of compassion. You are not being forced into anything today. You are being supported into seeing what you already know. The trine says, the body and the heart are on the same side. What Virgo's careful attention reveals is exactly what Venus's desires have been reaching toward all along. The map and the destination are pointing at the same place. It would be incomplete to talk about March 29th without acknowledging what sits just behind it. Saturn sextile. Pluto reached its exact perfection yesterday on March 28th at 5 degrees of Aries and 5 degrees of Aquarius. That aspect, the cooperative geometry between structure and transformation, between the planet of earned authority and the planet of deep inevitable change, is still resonating through the collective field today. Aspects of this magnitude do not conclude at the moment of their exactness. They linger. They continue to work in the days that follow their peak. And today is the first morning of the integration period of that Saturn-Pluto sextile. What that means in practical terms is that whatever recognitions arrived yesterday, whatever became clear, whatever was quietly decided or honestly named in the context of that powerful structural alignment, today those things begin to settle into the body, into the nervous system, into the actual lived experience of what it means to have seen something clearly and now be the person who has seen it. Saturn remains at 5 degrees of Aries. Pluto remains at 5 degrees of Aquarius. The work is not complete simply because the exact perfection of their angle has passed. In many ways, the work of integration is harder than the work of recognition. Recognition happens in a moment. Integration requires the steady, unglamorous, daily discipline of actually living in accordance with what you have recognized. And Saturn, being Saturn, is not going to let you off the hook on the follow-through simply because the dramatic moment of clarity has already occurred. Venus at 29 degrees of Aries today is standing within the territory where Saturn has been doing its most intense work this month. The Sun passed over Saturn's position several days ago. Venus is now approaching that same degree before she crosses into Taurus. This means Venus is, in a very real sense, passing through the aftermath of a significant Saturnian reckoning. She is traversing ground that has been recently cleared and restructured. And the desire she represents, the love and worth and beauty she governs, is being asked to move through that restructured ground before it crosses into the gentler, more comfortable terrain of Taurus. This is not incidental. The things you want, the people you love, the beauty you are seeking in your life, all of it is passing through the filter of what Saturn has recently clarified. What survived the Saturn sextile Pluto, what held up under the honest examination of structure and transformation working together, is exactly what Venus in Aries is now asking you to carry forward into the next chapter. What did not survive, what turned out to be desire built on fear or habit or avoidance rather than genuine alignment, is exactly what Venus is leaving behind at 29 degrees. Jupiter, meanwhile, sits at 15 degrees of Cancer, where it has been since March 10th when it turned direct after months of retrograde motion. Jupiter direct in Cancer is an enormous source of emotional and relational support right now. Cancer governs the home, the family, the emotional roots, and the deep interior life that feeds everything on the surface. Jupiter, expanding in Cancer since June of last year, has been amplifying all of those themes, and now that it is moving forward again, it carries the accumulated wisdom of everything the retrograde uncovered. The longing for genuine belonging, the need for emotional safety that does not require you to make yourself small. The recognition that nurturing yourself is not indulgence, but the precondition for being genuinely useful and genuinely present in any relationship or endeavor. Jupiter in Cancer trines the moon in Virgo today, in a wide but real orb, and that trine adds something important to the overall picture. It says the practical clarity that Virgo is bringing and the expansive emotional generosity that Cancer is providing are not at odds. Virgo's precision and Cancer's warmth are cooperating. The careful, attentive love that the moon in Virgo represents is being supported by the expansive, homemaking, deeply protective love that Jupiter in Cancer has been cultivating all year. You can be both clear and kind today. You can be both honest and nurturing. You do not have to choose between seeing things accurately and caring about what you see. Mercury, recently direct after its February retrograde, moves through the final degrees of Pisces today. Mercury in Pisces is not a planet in its most comfortable position. Mercury prefers clarity, definition, the ability to draw a clean line between one idea and another. Pisces dissolves lines. It prefers the experience of things merging, of meaning arriving through intuition rather than analysis, of understanding that comes not from breaking something down into parts, but from swimming in the whole of it. Mercury, fresh from its retrograde through these depths, has been surfacing things, uncovering things, bringing into the light of consciousness material that had been submerged beneath the ordinary flow of daily thought. Today, with Mars also still in Pisces at 20 degrees, The Piscean undercurrent running through the sky is significant. Mars and Mercury in Pisces together create a particular quality of action that is slow and intuitive rather than fast and tactical, action that responds to invisible cues rather than obvious signals, action that often looks like doing nothing from the outside but is, in fact, the most important kind of movement there is, the kind that happens internally at the level of intention before it manifests as anything visible in the world. This is the full context of March 29th. Venus at the edge, the moon in Virgo bearing witness. Saturn and Pluto's recent clarifications still settling into the collective bones. Jupiter in Cancer holding the emotional ground. Mercury and Mars in Pisces keeping the deeper currents flowing. This is a day of completion and preparation, a day of seeing clearly and carrying that seeing forward, a day of standing at the edge and understanding with unusual precision exactly what you are standing at the edge of. What does all of this mean for each of the 12 signs specifically? The answer depends entirely on where Venus and the Moon are moving through your individual chart, and that placement varies significantly from sign to sign. What follows is the most specific and honest reading possible of how today's sky lands for each of the 12. Approach this with your sun sign if that is your primary orientation, but if you know your rising sign, read that as well. And if you have Venus prominently placed in your natal chart, pay particular attention to where the themes of Venus's final Aries degree land for your specific configuration. Aries, Venus has been in your first house of identity and self for weeks, and her arrival at 29 degrees of your own sign is one of the most personally intense versions of this transit available in the zodiac. The first house is the house of self, of how you show up, of the face you turn toward the world and the identity you claim as your own. Venus here has been amplifying your personal magnetism, your desire to be seen and recognized for exactly who you are, and your willingness to pursue what you want without the usual mediation of social caution or second-guessing. At 29 degrees, she is asking you to name the full truth of what you want from your own life, not from a relationship, not from a career, not from how you are perceived, but from the deep interior experience of being you. The moon in Virgo lands in your 6th house today, the house of daily practice, physical health, and the small repeated choices that constitute a life. The practical question the moon is asking you is this: are your daily habits, the way you spend your ordinary hours, actually in alignment with the identity Venus has been building in your 1st house? Because the most important version of this threshold crossing is not the dramatic one, it is the ordinary one. It is the choice you make tomorrow morning and the day after about how to inhabit the life you say you want. Taurus, Venus is moving toward the sign of your birth, and there is something deeply personal for you about what she is completing in Aries before she arrives home. Your 1st house, which is Aries in the natural wheel reading relevant for your rising sign, encompasses the territory just before you, the initiating energy that feeds into your own identity. What Venus is finishing in Aries is related to everything you have been beginning, everything you have been bold enough to start or reach for over the past weeks without knowing whether it would be received. Tomorrow, when she enters your own sign and your own 1st house, she carries with her everything that was learned and everything that was released in that Aries threshold. The moon moves into your 5th house of creativity, self-expression, and the pleasures that make life feel worth inhabiting, and it trines Venus in that final Aries degree. What is being illuminated in your 5th house today is directly connected to what you have been quietly wanting. The moon in Virgo in your 5th asks, what would it look like to approach your creative life and your joy with the same careful, practical attention you give to things you consider more serious? That question is not rhetorical. It has an answer. Find it today. Gemini, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries passes through your 11th house, the house of community, collective purpose, and the vision you hold for your future self. Venus here has been activating your desires around belonging, around the groups and circles you wish to be part of, around the version of yourself you want to be seen as by the people whose opinions genuinely matter to you. At the final degree, she is asking whether the community you have been building toward is actually one that reflects who you are becoming, or whether it is a community defined by who you used to be, by an older identity you have outgrown, but not yet fully left behind. The moon enters your 4th house today, the house of home, family, emotional foundation, and the private interior of your life. The moon in Virgo here brings its careful, attentive energy to the question of what is actually happening beneath the surface of your domestic life and your deepest sense of belonging. The trine between the moon in your 4th and Venus in your 11th says the private healing and the public becoming are not separate projects. They feed each other. What you tend carefully in the interior is exactly what blooms in the exterior. Cancer. Venus at 29 degrees of Aries sits in your 10th house of career, public reputation, and the legacy you are building through your work in the world. Venus in this house has been making the things you create and the way you are professionally known feel more personal, more tied to who you genuinely are, rather than who you have learned to perform in professional contexts. At the final degree, the question is stark. What is it that you actually want your work in the world to look like? Not the version that satisfies external expectations, but the version that satisfies the interior knowing of what you are genuinely here to contribute. The moon enters your 3rd house today, the house of communication, daily thinking, and the immediate intellectual environment you inhabit. The moon in Virgo here sharpens your ability to name exactly what you have been sensing. There are words available today for things that have been circling wordlessly in your awareness for weeks. Use them. Write them down. The trine from your 3rd house, moon to your 10th house, Venus is an invitation to speak, with clarity and without apology, about what you are building and why it matters. Leo, Venus, at 29 degrees of Aries passes through your 9th house of philosophy, belief, long-distance horizons, and the expanding mind that reaches beyond what is immediately known. Venus here has been making your beliefs feel more personal, more tied to what you genuinely love about being alive, rather than what you have been told you should believe or value. The final degree asks, what is the belief that you have been circling but not yet fully claiming? The belief about what you deserve, about what is possible for someone with your specific nature, about what a meaningful life for you actually looks like. The moon enters your 2nd house today, the house of material resources, personal values, and the deep interior sense of what you are worth. Moon in Virgo in your 2nd is extraordinarily precise about the relationship between your values and your daily choices. Where are you spending your time, energy, and money in ways that do not actually reflect what you say you believe is most important? The trine from your 2nd house, moon to your 9th house, Venus is asking you to let your beliefs land in your body as a sense of worth, not just as an intellectual position, but as a felt experience of knowing what you bring to any situation. Virgo, you are hosting the moon today. The moon entering your sign means the emotional atmosphere of the entire day is passing through your specific lens, your particular quality of attention, your characteristic insistence on seeing things clearly and honestly rather than through the distorting filter of wishful thinking. This is not always comfortable for you. Hosting the moon in Virgo means all of your natural tendencies toward self-critique, toward the identification of what is not yet right or not yet complete, are amplified. The moon conjuncts nothing in the sky today at its exact degree of entry, but it soon trines Venus, and that trine is your most important energetic event. Venus at 29 degrees of Aries sits in your 8th house, the house of deep transformation, shared resources, and the psychological contracts that run through your closest bonds. The question Venus is finishing in your 8th house is about power and desire. What have you been wanting in the most intimate and private chambers of your experience, and what would it mean to name that desire out loud rather than keeping it carefully submerged? The moon in your 1st house is the witness to that question, and what it sees is someone capable of far more emotional honesty than they usually allow themselves. Libra, Venus rules your sign and you feel her movements more keenly than most. Today she sits at the final degree of your 7th house, the house of significant partnerships, the house that mirrors you back to yourself through the quality of the relationships you choose to inhabit. Venus in your 7th has been making your desires around partnership feel more urgent, more direct, less willing to compromise on the things that genuinely matter. At 29 degrees, she is finishing the chapter of whatever honest reckoning this transit has asked of you around partnership. The question is not gentle. What have you been accepting in relationship that you actually no longer want, and what have you been wanting that you have been afraid to ask for directly? The moon enters your 12th house today, the house of hidden matters, deep rest, and the spiritual interior that operates beneath ordinary consciousness. Moon in Virgo in your 12th is a very specific energy, one that brings careful, attentive awareness to things you usually do not look at directly. The trine from your 12th house moon to your 7th house, Venus, is extraordinary for a Libra. It says the answer to what you want in partnership is already known to you. You have been carrying it in the part of yourself that you do not usually show anyone. Today is a day to be honest with yourself about it, even if you are not yet ready to be honest with anyone else. Scorpio, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries moves through your 6th house of daily practice, health, and the work you do in ordinary time. Venus here has been making your relationship to your daily life feel more personally meaningful, less like a set of obligations and more like a chosen practice of what genuinely sustains you. At the final degree, she is asking, what daily habits, routines, or working relationships have you been tolerating that are actively working against the life you say you want to be living? And what practices have you been resisting that your body and your heart have been asking for? The moon enters your 11th house today, the house of your wider community, your future-oriented vision, and the causes or groups that carry meaning for you. Moon in Virgo in your 11th brings careful discernment to the question of where you are spending your collective energy. Not every community you belong to is actually nourishing the direction you want to move in. Not every vision you have been holding is one that still reflects who you are. The trine from your 11th house, moon to your 6th house, Venus, is asking you to let your daily life and your larger vision talk to each other honestly. Sagittarius, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries passes through your 5th house, the house of creative expression, play, romance, and the joyful claiming of who you are when you are most fully alive. Venus in your 5th has been one of the most personally enlivening transits available, amplifying your desire for joy, your appetite for romantic and creative experience, and your willingness to let yourself be seen in the full radiance of your actual personality rather than a managed version of it. At the final degree, the question is about creative and romantic courage. What have you been holding back, whether in an artistic project, a romantic situation, or simply the expression of your genuine enthusiasm for being alive? What would it mean to let that last held thing out before Venus crosses into a different house and a different chapter? The moon enters your 10th house today, the house of your public life, career, and long-term reputation. Moon in Virgo in your 10th is practical and precise about what you are building professionally and how the choices you are making now are shaping the arc of your public contribution. The trine from your 10th house, moon to your 5th house, Venus says the joy and the work are not separate, and the most sustainable version of your career is the one that does not require you to leave your authentic creative self at the door. Capricorn, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries moves through your 4th house, the house of home, family, emotional foundation, and the private self that you rarely let the world see. Venus in your 4th has been doing quiet but significant work in the territory of your interior life, your domestic world, and your relationship to the people and places that constitute your sense of rootedness. At the final degree, she is asking a question that goes to the core of your deepest emotional life. What do you actually want your home to feel like? Not what it looks like from the outside, not what it produces, but what it feels like to be inside it. And what are you still carrying from your family history that is shaping the answer to that question in ways you have not fully examined? The moon enters your 9th house today, the house of expanding horizons, philosophical inquiry, and the beliefs you hold about what is possible. Moon in Virgo in your 9th brings precise, discriminating attention to your belief system, particularly the beliefs about what you are allowed to want. The trine from your 9th house Moon to your 4th house Venus is asking, what would it mean to genuinely believe you deserve to feel at home? Aquarius, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries passes through your 3rd house of communication, immediate intellectual environment, and the daily flow of ideas and exchange through which your mind is constantly moving. Venus here has been making your conversations, your writing, your ways of connecting with people in ordinary daily interaction feel more personal, more charged with genuine desire to be heard and to hear accurately. At the final degree, the question is about honesty in communication. What is the thing you have been meaning to say and have not yet said? Not the performance of saying something, not the strategic calculated communication, but the direct, unmediated expression of something you actually think, feel, or want. The moon enters your 8th house today, the house of psychological depth, shared resources, and the power dynamics that operate in your most intimate relationships. Moon in Virgo in your 8th is unsparing in its clarity about what is actually happening beneath the surface of your closest bonds. The trine from your 8th house Moon to your 3rd house Venus says that the honest conversation is the transformative one. The words you find today for what has been wordless are the words that change something. Pisces, Venus at 29 degrees of Aries moves through your 2nd house, the house of material resources, personal values, and the felt sense of what you are worth. Venus in your 2nd has been one of the most practically important transits available, activating your desires around financial stability, around the things you value enough to protect, and around the deepest interior knowing of what you bring to the world. At the final degree, she is asking the question that Pisces often finds hardest to answer, with clarity. What do you actually believe you deserve? Not what you intellectually understand about universal worth or spiritual equity, but what you viscerally, bodily, practically believe you have the right to ask for, to receive, to hold. The moon enters your 7th house today, the house of partnership and significant one-to-one relationships. Moon in Virgo in your 7th is precise about what is and is not working in your relational world, about where you are overgiving and where you are not asking for what you need. The trine from your 7th house, Moon to your 2nd house, Venus asks you to let the clarity you have about your own worth show up in how you move through your relationships. Venus enters Taurus tomorrow, March 30th, and she does not arrive empty-handed. She arrives carrying everything she gathered in Aries, every bit of honest desire, every moment of direct reaching for what she wanted, every courageous or failed attempt at claiming something real. And in Taurus, that harvested fire meets the earth, becomes embodied, becomes sensory, becomes the kind of value that can be touched and tasted rather than simply felt as urgency. Venus is in domicile in Taurus. This is the language astrologers use to describe a planet in the sign where it functions at its fullest and most natural expression. Think of it as the difference between a person visiting a foreign country where they are perpetually navigating unfamiliar customs and that same person returning home where they move with the effortless fluency of someone who knows every room. Venus in Aries has been visiting. Venus in Taurus is arriving home. What this means for the weeks ahead is a shift in the quality of desire itself. The urgency of Aries gives way to something slower and more sensory. The reaching gives way to the receiving. The fire of wanting gives way to the deep, unhurried, undefended pleasure of having. This does not mean things become passive or static. Taurus is one of the most productive signs in the zodiac, but its productivity is rooted, earthy, patient. It builds not through force, but through consistency. It creates not through bold gestures, but through the daily return to what is genuinely worth tending. The things that survive the crossing from Aries to Taurus are the things that were built on real want rather than urgency. The desires that make it through the threshold with Venus are the desires that were honest enough at 29 degrees to be spoken, if only to the interior witness of the moon in Virgo. The love that makes it through is the love that has been tested by the directness of Aries and has not flinched. The creative work that crosses with her is the work that you admitted, even in the final urgent degree, was genuinely yours. And what Venus leaves behind in Aries at 29 degrees today is everything that was desire built on performance rather than truth. Everything that was wanting something because you thought you were supposed to want it. Everything that was the emotional residue of someone else's definition of what is worth desiring. All of that stays behind. It does not cross into Taurus with her. It does not get the deep, nourishing, embodied gift of what Venus in domicile provides. This is why today matters. Not because tomorrow will be ordinary. Tomorrow will be beautiful in its own way. Venus entering Taurus is one of the genuinely easiest and most generous ingresses in the astrological calendar. But what you bring to tomorrow depends entirely on what you are honest about today. The moon in Virgo is witnessing this transition with the particular quality of care that only Virgo can bring. The care that is precise because it loves. The care that is honest because dishonesty, in the long run, is the most unkind thing possible. And what it sees is a Venus at the edge, holding in her final Aries degree everything that has been learned, everything that is being released, and everything that is, at last, ready to come home. Thresholds are not experienced in their full meaning at the moment of crossing. They are experienced afterward, in the days and weeks that follow, when you are standing on the new side and beginning to understand what the crossing actually changed. March 29th will be one of those days that makes more sense in retrospect, when you can look back and trace exactly what shifted in the quiet of a day that may not have seemed dramatic at the time. The combination of Venus at 29 degrees and the moon in Virgo does not produce fireworks. It does not produce the electric crackle of a major collision between outer planets. It produces something more durable, clarity, the quiet, clean, unmistakable clarity of knowing what you want and where you are standing in relation to it. The clarity of having had the internal conversation that needed to happen, even if no one else witnessed it. The clarity of the moon in Virgo having seen exactly what is there to be seen, without flinching, without softening it into something more comfortable, but also through that trine to Venus without cruelty. In the days that follow today, Venus in Taurus begins her grounded, sensory, deeply embodied work of building value into the fabric of daily life. The things that cross with her into Taurus, the honest desires, the genuine loves, the creative commitments that survived the final Aries degree, those are the seeds of what this spring is going to grow into. Taurus is a fertile sign. What is planted in it, carefully and with real intention, tends to grow with unusual reliability. The patience required is real, but the yield is proportionate to the honesty of the seed. The moon will move through Virgo for the next 2 days, continuing to bring its careful, attentive, practically oriented awareness to the question of what is working and what is not, to the body, to the daily practices, to the small repeated choices that constitute the texture of a life. This is not glamorous astrological weather. It is useful astrological weather. Virgo is the sign that understands that most of life happens not in the dramatic moments, but in the ordinary ones, and that the quality of the ordinary determines almost everything about the quality of the extraordinary when it arrives. Saturn at 5 degrees of Aries continues to hold the structural ground. Its sextile to Pluto in Aquarius may be past its exact moment, but Saturn does not conclude its work simply because an aspect has peaked. It continues to build, to require, to reward the disciplined effort with the specific gift that only Saturn gives, something real, something that was not there before, and that will still be there years from now because it was built honestly on the foundation of what is actually true, rather than what is merely convenient or comfortable. Jupiter in Cancer continues its generous forward motion, expanding the emotional ground, making space for the kind of nurturing and belonging that does not require you to diminish yourself in order to receive it. Jupiter's direct motion since March 10th has been building momentum, and by the time we move through April, that momentum will be fully felt. The expansion of emotional possibility that Jupiter in Cancer provides is the ground into which the seeds Venus carries into Taurus will eventually fall. Generous ground, fertile ground, the kind of ground that rewards honest planting. This is the larger picture of where we are. Venus at the edge today, crossing into Taurus tomorrow, carrying the honest harvest of everything Aries clarified. The moon in Virgo witnessing the crossing with precise, attentive, ultimately loving clarity. Saturn and Pluto's recent sextile providing the structural backbone that makes the emotional and relational work sustainable rather than ephemeral. Jupiter in Cancer providing the emotional generosity that turns clarity into capacity rather than simply into the awareness of limitation. And Mercury and Mars in Pisces keeping the deeper waters moving, keeping the invisible work of intention and spiritual preparation flowing beneath the surface of everything visible. Today is the edge, and standing at an edge, if you are paying enough attention to actually feel the ground change beneath you, is one of the most important things a human being gets to do. There is a particular kind of courage that this day is asking for, and it is worth naming it directly because it is not the kind of courage that tends to get celebrated or even recognized as courage. It is not the courage of the dramatic gesture or the public declaration, it is the courage of the private admission. The courage of sitting quietly with what you actually want, rather than what you have been performing wanting, and letting it be true. Fully, uncomplicatedly, without qualification, true. Venus at 2009 degrees of Aries has been working toward this admission for weeks. Every aspect she made on her journey through this sign. The conjunction with Neptune that softened the boundaries of desire. The conjunction with Saturn that asked whether what you want is also something you are willing to build with patience and discipline. The sextile to Pluto that cleared away whatever was blocking the authentic expression of desire from rising. All of it was preparation for today. All of it was the progressive stripping away of everything that was not real, in service of arriving at this final degree with something honest remaining. The moon in Virgo is the witness to that honesty, and Virgo, as a witness, is not gentle with pretense. It sees through it immediately, without judgment but without accommodation. When the moon is in Virgo, there is a particular sharpness available in your own perception of your own inner life. The stories you tell yourself about why you want what you want, the justifications you have built around your desires to make them acceptable or palatable or less frightening, those stories become visible as stories today. The moon in Virgo can distinguish between the story and the thing beneath the story, and it is the thing beneath the story that Venus, at her final degree, is asking you to name. This is not a call to act impulsively on every desire that surfaces today. That is Aries without Saturn's discipline. That is the fire without the form. What is being asked is something more specific, to acknowledge what is true, internally, privately, honestly, before Venus crosses into Taurus and the opportunity for that particular, urgent, firelit honesty passes. Because Taurus does not ask for the same kind of honesty that Aries demands. Taurus asks for patience, for steadiness, for the slow building of what has value. All of that is necessary and beautiful. But it requires knowing first, with the clarity that only Aries can provide, what is actually worth being patient about. What is it? What is the thing you have been wanting? Not vaguely, not generally, but specifically. The moon in Virgo is asking you to be specific today, because specificity is the form that honesty takes in Virgo. Not the broad emotional gesture, but the particular clear statement. Not the feeling in general, but the named experience of the feeling. Not the desire in abstract, but the actual articulated thing being desired. You do not have to tell anyone else what arrives for you today. You do not have to act on it. You do not have to make it into a plan or a declaration or a decision, though any of those things are available to you if they feel true. What matters? What Venus at 29 degrees and the moon in Virgo are together asking for is simply that you know it, that you do not let the threshold pass without at least being honest with yourself about what you are standing at the edge of. Because the sky on a day like today is not offering a dramatic transformation. It is offering something quieter and more lasting. It is offering the moment of clear seeing, that makes everything that comes after more real. The crossings that matter most in a human life are rarely the ones that announce themselves loudly. They are the ones that happen in the private interior of an honest moment, in the space between what you have been and what you are becoming, in the quiet and precise light of a moon that sees clearly and a Venus that for one last burning day is still willing to say exactly what it wants. If today landed somewhere real, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave something in the comments, a word, a feeling, whatever arrived for you in listening. The threshold is real. You felt it, and what you felt today is yours to carry forward into everything that comes next.